Greetings, chess fans all over the world, and a warm welcome to the highlights of round 6 from the 42nd Chess Olympiad 2016 in Baku. My name's Ilja Zaragatski, and today I'm going to have the pleasure of taking you through the most exciting, most memorable moments of the day in both the women's and the open section. So, yesterday there's been a rest day, and the players did get a chance to recharge their batteries, to relax a bit, and also to perfect their preparation for the day. I would suggest let us jump right in and check out who succeeded more in that and who succeeded less. Being the gentleman that I am, obviously I'm going to start with the women's section, where we can see immediately on the very top table the encounter between Ukraine and Russia, obviously two of the main contenders for the gold medal. And the match ended peacefully. However, when I say peacefully, I actually mean there's been a lot of bloodshed. All 4 games went back and forth. A lot of critical moments, exciting stuff. And at the end, it was level, although the Ukraine did have a couple of chances to win this match against the Russian ladies. We'll get back to that later on. We'll see at least one of the games in more detail where some chances were missed. But yeah, in the end, it has been a draw. Agreed in this match, if you can say. Second table, Romania versus China. The Romanian women should not be underestimated. They're playing quite a good tournament, very solid team, and they held the Chinese women to a draw, where Hu Yifan, the reigning world champion, decided to take another rest day after the rest day and let her teammates do the job, although they did struggle a bit. And on the very first board, the world's number 2, Yu Wenyun, was defeated by the Romanian IM Corina Isabella Peptan. Very strong performance by the top board of the Romanians, and thus the match was drawn. Another draw on the third table, Kazakhstan versus Hungary. The Hungarian ladies, surely the favorites in this clash, weren't able to pull it off, had to be content with the draw. And then also Georgia against Azerbaijan, the local heroes. Also a 2-2. So all 4 top tables in the women's section ended with draws, and the Georgian women, surely as well as the Russian and the Ukrainian and the Chinese women, one team that is planning to go for medals here in this encounter, also with a draw. And yeah, that is what I intended to mention in the women's section. So very close race there. None of the teams has won all the matches. They all had to at least draw or win one of their encounters. It's gonna be a very close race, and we're gonna see some of the games in more details later on. Now it's time to switch to the open section, where before the round there's been 3 teams with a perfect team score, namely India, the Netherlands, and Ukraine. And after the round, only one of those teams remained with this perfect score, which was India. And the Indian boys were able to beat the Netherlands on the first table, with Bhaskaran Adiban scoring the decisive victory against Erwin Lamy on the second board with the black pieces, and we're gonna look at that game later on as well. Second table, another top clash between the United States of America and Ukraine. The Ukraine so far has been the team to watch and to cheer for. They beat a lot of strong teams, for example also Russia, but now they have been stopped by the US boys. And the decisive game was played on the first board here, with Fabiano Caruana beating Pavel Elyanov in a very long and complicated struggle, finally he managed to pull it off and to score the victory for his country, thereby beating Ukraine 2.5 to 1.5. Then the Czech Republic drew against Georgia, another 2-2. All games were drawn. And the Azeri men's team wasn't able to beat Greece, which is a little bit below their expectations since they are planning to play for the medals as well, maybe even for the title, make use of their home advantage if there is such a thing in chess. Here they were held to a draw by Greece. We're gonna take a look at one of the games from this match later on as well. Then it was Canada against Belarus, and the Canadians were able to beat the Belarus Grandmaster squad with 2.5, 1.5, with Eric Hansen, the famous chess bra, beating Andrei Zhigalko. Germany against Russia was one of the other highlights of round 6, where the Germans had to concede a loss against Russia 3-1. Perfect team strategy in action, as we can see here. Both white games were won by Kramnik and Nepomniachtchi, and the black games were comfortably drawn. That's something which the captain of the Russian team, Andrei Filatov, most surely will like. Then the Chinese reigning Olympiad winners of Olympiad champions of 2014 in Tromsø beat Argentina, even though Wang Yu lost to Sandro Mareko, who had Hikaru Nakamura in the ropes in one of the previous rounds already. However, he didn't manage to finalize the game to a win. Here he was able to finalize the game to a win against Wang Yu with the black colors. So quite a nice tournament for Sandro Mareko, the top board of the Argentinian team. So finally, Magnus Carlsen of Norway, the reigning world champion, also with a little bit of a disappointment against Julio Sadora from the Philippines. Just a draw with the white pieces, although Magnus Carlsen was in some troubles in this game and could have easily lost as well. So can't be too happy with that. And Norway against the Philippines 2-2. I'm sure you'll be able to check out the pairings and the table yourself. So let us check some games in more detail. Let us see what the players did on the board and how things went in this round. Once again, I'm gonna start with the ladies over here, and I'm gonna start with the game between Valentina Gunina and Maria Muzichuk, which is the second board between Russia and Ukraine. So this game was crazy as ever. We see a lot of very exciting stuff in the women's section. I don't even know where to start my analysis. I'm gonna start somewhere here, although the position certainly is extremely crazy. Black is 4 pawns up, no less than 4 pawns. White's king doesn't have any pawn shield around. Yet, it's not that easy yet, but Black should be able to convert his or her advantage to a full point under normal circumstances. However, Valentina Gunina is quite famous for being able to swindle her opponents in complicated positions that are objectively lost, but still posing them some practical difficulties, practical problems. And here she did again. Note that the bishop is cutting off the king along the f-file. The rook is x-raying the d-file. So the king does feel just a little bit uncomfortable still with precise play. Black should be able to win this game. So knight d3 followed, rook e6 one of those moves where you don't really know what to do. Should you take the rook? How bad can it be to win an exchange? Okay, there's gonna be a knight on e6, but maybe you can still bear it. For example, f takes g5. You gotta stay calm here, stay cool. It's not a mate yet since the knight on d3 is blocking the d file, but of course this is easier said than done in such a very important match. Nerves are also of the essence. So rook to e6, then knight c5 looks hella logical as well, attacking the knight. The knight is attacking the queen and the rook forking those pieces. Queen b4 takes on e6, queen b7. Let's take stock. Well, it's just a rook and it's 3 pawns in addition to the rook. However, the queen is threatening the rook on a6 with a check. The king does feel a little bit uncomfy. So what to do? Rook d8 looks like the logical continuation here. However, that is the move which simply draws. There's no way around it. After rook d8, white has a very nice trick to secure the draw. What to do instead? Well, computer spits out a lot of different ideas. One thing that was possible here, one continuation that would have probably secured the full point, is knight d8 and then queen h5, attacking this rook. Alright, so black sacrificed the rook, but he was one rook up already. And here it's 3 extra pawns, and what is even much more important, the white coordination is going to suffer. The rook is attacked. It has to move somewhere. F takes g5 is in the air, and there's no coming through. For example, after rook c1, f takes g5, this bishop is in dire straits as well. And if the rook decides to stay on the d file, well, then the rook is the queen is entering white's camp, and yeah, there's just too many threats going on here, and black has everything under control. Note that, for example, knight c6 with a devious idea of mating on d8, even if black was to take on c6 with the bishop, would be answered by one of those really annoying checks, for example queen c6, and now we can see that white's house of cards is falling apart. So rook d8 was a very decisive mistake, and now is there actually a superlative of decisive? I don't think so. So yeah, that was a decisive mistake. Obviously, knight takes e6, bishop takes e6, and now queen takes c6. What to do? You can't go rook d7 because of queen c8, and it's gonna be mate on d8. Bishop d7 looks like the logical continuation here, but rook takes d7, rook. Note how clumsy this king on e8 now feels. He doesn't have anywhere to flee, and it's just a draw. Very tragic stuff just before the time control. Rook d8, the decisive blunder right here. And yeah, quite regrettable for Maria Muzychuk, the former women's world champion, and also for the whole Ukrainian team. It could have gone into the other direction easily, and then Ukrainian team would have won the match and would have had brilliant chances for maybe even the gold medal. It wasn't meant to be, though. Alexandra Kostyniuk with black lost against Anna Muzychuk, Maria's sister, but on the other hand, luckily for the women from Russia, Olga Giria won her game against Anna Uzhanina, the other former women's world champion, if I'm not mistaken, after some trouble, but she still managed to win this game, and hence the match was leveled. So quite exciting stuff. If you want to dive into those games in more detail and relive the drama, feel free to check out the games. Also, maybe in the live commentary, there's gonna be some exciting stuff going on. Now let's go over to the open section and let us check what has happened there. We do have this top encounter on the first table between the Netherlands and India, where all games were quite level from the beginning until almost the end, except for this game where Erwin Lamy blundered a pawn in this very position. If we take stock, white does have 2 pawns for the exchange, 2 very powerful bishops with nice outposts here on d5 and on c3. Quite an annoying pawn there on g7. If only the rook could get around supporting it. It's not that easy though. So no problem for white so far. You should think after a normal move, any move really, any pawn move on the king side or rook f. Well, rook f1 you have to be careful with actually because of all of these tricks. But maybe even rook b1 with the idea b3 would be feasible. Instead, Erwin decided to go 36, rook d1, just 4 moves before the time control, and this proved to be the decisive mistake almost. I'm pretty sure he did see bishop takes c4, making use of this pin along the d file, and I'm pretty sure he was planning bishop takes f7, a little bit of a counter trick with the idea of just winning this exchange on d6. However, there's one drawback in this line, and it's this cute little mate on f1. So you can't really go bishop f7. What can you do? The only move that's not losing any more material immediately is bishop f3, but here after exchange on d1, bishop d5, just defending the pawn. After this whole operation, black won a pawn, is now 1 exchange up, and what is also quite important, black managed to exchange the rooks, a pair of rooks in this position, thereby minimizing white's active ideas, and now this pawn cannot be really supported. There's no threats that white can pose against black's king. The bishop cannot go or come around any way to support the pawn queening. So from here on it was quite straightforward. Question of technique really now. This one is a weakness. Black won a pawn already. And yeah, now it's just an exchange without any proper counterplay, and the rest was easy going for Bhaskaran Adiban, the Indian international. So quite a painful blunder there, but what can you do? These things happen. What happened in the match between the US boys against Ukraine? 3 games were drawn, but 1 game was not, and it is this encounter between Fabiano Caruana and Pavel Elyanov. So we did have a very unorthodox opening phase with the Rossolimo, where black decided to recapture on c6 with the b pawn, which is not the most popular line, but still quite playable. And then after 16 moves, we got this position where all minor pieces exchanged. Now you could think, well, this is pretty boring stuff. There are no minor pieces, it's all just equal. But this pawn on e6 is just a little uncomfortable to deal with for black, and in the further proceedings of this game, white proved why that is. So here white was able to create a passed pawn on the a file, which is also a bit of an asset in this position, and also without going into too much detail, black's king still does feel a little bit unsafe. So these pawns exchanged, and now after c5 we do get to see white's trumps and just repeated the moves here, took on c5. And this position, although it might look not too scary at first sight, is real uncomfortable to play for black here. Okay, so white's king has been weakened a bit as well, but it's still kind of safer than the black king. And what is also important, black has one extra pawn island here in comparison to white. The pawns on c6 and e7 both are very vulnerable, and as Fabiano proved in the game, this pass pawn on the a file is pretty dangerous as well. So if you combine all of these ideas as white, then you can play for some advantage here, and that's exactly what Fabiano Caruana did. He's quite strong in these easy types of positions. No exchange of queens whatsoever, because black's weakness of the king weighs more heavily than white's weakness of the king in this position. Just centralize his pieces, push the a pawn, combine it with threats against both these pawns and the king. And very soon, actually much sooner than anyone would have guessed, I believe, the advantage grew to be decisive. It looks like black is still fine here. Like, he has very active pieces. His queen and the rook on f7 both gang up on the pawn on f2. He threatens to push his pawn as well, but it's actually not what it seems. White just exchanged those rooks, and then there's no way really to stop this pawn. Any check on the long diagonal will be met with queen f3. So not here obviously, but when the rooks exchanged. Couple of checks just to find the perfect square for the queen, a7, queen b7, and h4. And again, combining threats against the king with ideas of queening this pawn simply decides here. G5 and queen g4 is a very serious threat to meet, and here one way to decide the game would be to just exchange queens and then queen the a pawn. So very nice game by Fabiano Caruana, quite patiently played, accumulated his advantages, and in the end he was able to win this game, to convert his advantage to a full point. So all US fans out there should be quite happy with this result, the Ukraine being the team to beat so far, and the US guys, the US boys, pulled it off. Let me check my cheat sheet. What else was there? Well, the Azeri team did have problems to convert, if you want to call it convert their ELO advantages into a team win. And the one who had most problems was former German international Arkady Neidich. Here we see his game against Athanasios Mastrovasilis. Arkady does play with the black pieces. It is a mess already. As we can see, white's king is very open, quite vulnerable. However, black does have some active pieces here. The bishop on the long diagonal is a very nice piece, and in some distant future maybe the c-pawn might start running. H takes g4. Wait, it's black to move. H takes g4 certainly is a threat, so what to do about it? The best way to continue here is to attack this knight on h5, which is quite a nuisance, so it should be nudged back if possible. And this is what Arkady did by playing queen h4. However, it turned out it's not the perfect way to do it, and we're gonna see why in just a second. Queen e8 was almost the only move to hold the balance here, attacking this knight. The idea, h takes g4, f takes g4, and here once the queen, which is attacked, moves, queen takes h3 will be possible. So all good here. And bishop takes d6, which is another possibility for white attacking the rook here and offering to exchange those knights on h5 and g4. However, taking the exchange on f8 in addition to that looks quite scary, but here there is queen e3, a very devious idea. Just exchange the queens. Now the black king does feel quite a bit safer, and in the complications that arise, black seems to be able to hold his own here in this position. So queen e8 was kind of mandatory to keep the balance. Instead, Arkady played queen h4 with the idea h takes, f takes, g4, and here again double threats against white's pieces are fine for black. However, bishop d6 here, and now where there's no queen e3 check, the rook is attacked. It can't really go anywhere because then white is gonna take on g4, f takes g4 is gonna be met by queen f7 mate. So bishop takes d6. What to do? Arkady played knight e5, attack the queen, but here after queen e3, rook e8, and queen h6, it turned out that white's attack is just irresistible. Black's king is a target, a very serious target for white's pieces to to attack. Not sure if this is proper English, but I'm pretty sure that you know what I mean. Black's forces are going to be tied to defending this king, and white can simply increase his activity and activate his pieces, and that's exactly what happened. It's just very uncomfortable to play with such an eternal target, the king on f8. Always good for some mating ideas. So without going into deep here into the analysis, let me just show you how the game was finished. Nicely played by Master Vasilis, and Arkady Naiditsch lost his first game. He has been scoring brilliantly so far, but now he lost his game, and Azerbaijan lost their match as well. Luckily for the Azeri hosts, Altay Zafarli was able to equalize in a position which looked very equalish to me and to us while we were doing the German live commentary, Grandmaster Niklas Huschenbeet and myself. But Altay Zafarli understood the position just a little bit better than us and found some nice resources here. Black's king again is in trouble. There are ideas of pinning this rook here. You can't go g6 because then I'm going to invade via the 7th rank, and you can't go king g6 because of queen e6 check, and then, for example, rook f6. How else would you defend this rook? Queen e8, and black suffers severe material losses. So in the end, g3 here. The idea is playing f3 actually, and then g4. However, after f3, please note that the rook is pinned, and f2, king f1 is not a problem for white either. So g3, very devious idea, since f3 would have been met by g3 by black himself. But g3, and now it's really difficult to find a cure against this threat. Strange as it might look, this king is simply in trouble. There's other ideas like queen a8 looming. So in the end, Altay Zafarli, by playing very trickily, I want to say, secured the draw, at least for the Azeri men's team. So that were the major happenings in the open section. Let me just hint at another gem from this round, which is the game between Vladimir Kramnik and Georg Meyer, or maybe George, I should say, speaking the English tongue in this video. So yeah, I want to start my analysis, which is not going to be too exhaustive, of this game Here, Georg Mayer decided to play the French defense against Vladimir Kramnik, who usually doesn't open with 1e4. Here he did. Georg Mayer's main weapon is the Rubinstein variation of the French, but he was probably a little bit worried that Vladimir Kramnik found one idea to play for an advantage, to out-prepare his opponent, so he didn't go for it. He went for the Steinitz variation of the French, and then after 14 moves we got this position. Both players were out of book at this stage, and well, it's just exciting stuff. Let me show you just a couple of motives of this position, being a French player myself. So Queen G3 just overprotected E5 and also hinted at the idea of playing Queen H3, and also Bishop takes H7 is a very nice resource. So F takes E5 looks very logical, because after F takes E5 there's Knight takes E5, Knight takes E5 and Bishop H4, winning by pinning, and the Queen is gonna be lost, even though Knight takes E6, one might argue, still offers White some chances. This is a very big mess. Everything is hanging, but seems to be working fine for White still. So Knight takes E5, Knight takes E5, not Bishop H4 as you might think, but simply recapturing on E5, Queen takes, and now Bishop F6, winning decisive material is good enough for Black in this position. So F takes E5. Another possible continuation would be Rook takes F3. Now, same idea. After G takes F3, there's Bishop H4. Now, definitely winning the Queen. And Queen takes F3, there's Knight takes E5, and all Black's pieces come to life. Typical for the French when Black is able to break through in the center to bruise open the central pawn chain, and here same applies. Queen is attacked, it's gonna go to H3 most probably, but then exchange on D3. Of course this bishop was not tolerable anymore. D4, forking the pieces and winning decisive material. All kinds of resources and ideas in this position. This is why you must love it. But one problem with F takes E5, and that's Queen H3. So not recapturing, but Queen H3, threatening to mate this guy, this monarch on G8. So what to do? You can't go Knight F6, that's not serious. F takes E5 and too many threats. But what about E4? Let's check that move. So Queen takes E6, right, it's a check. King H8, Queen takes C6. But maybe this is still survivable for Black. He's gonna recapture on either D3 or F3, win back a piece, and things are not that clear yet, but Knight takes E4 instead of Queen E6 is a very important resource here, and the bishop from E4 is doing his job brilliantly, attacking the knight on C6 and also the pawn on H7. Now Knight F6 is imperative, and bishop takes C6. White is just a pawn up and does hold all the trumps in this position. So F takes E5, Queen H3, E4, Knight E4, very strong. Well spotted by the former world champion and also by Georg Mayer, who plays D4 here. And now the mess continues even further. What's the idea of D4? Well, it's similar to what we've seen before. Knight takes D4 looks like the logical move. Please note that Queen H3 attacking both H7 and E6. Now F5 is the right move. Knight takes D4, and now maybe you've already spotted it. A little trick to not lose the pawn. Knight takes E5, thereby opening the D file for the queen. F takes E5, Knight takes D4 is fine for Black, just regaining the pawn on E5 there. And knight takes c6, knight takes e6 is also fine for white. Even moves like e5 need to be considered here. But also, yeah, just some queen c7 or b5 and bishop b7. Black is fine. So knight takes d4. Another possibility, we just checked this move, queen h3, f5, then knight takes d4, which turned out not to be dangerous, but knight takes d4 is possible. And here knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, f takes e5 was Georg Meyer's idea. Double attacking this bishop and threatening bishop h4, watch out for that. Well, it's not a pin, but it still wins material. So who cares what it's called? Right. So, okay, even though bishop f2 would still save material, but black is simply doing great here. He takes f3, he takes f4, queen h3, knight f6, and it goes all downhill for white from here. So knight takes d4 was also was not played either by Vladimir Kramnik. Instead, he castled queenside, which is another extremely venomous move, and we're gonna see the idea in the game. Bishop takes h7. Let's check this real quick. Was the other idea, and the idea is to collect the pawn and then subsequently take on c6. This looks really great for white, since this rook is also gonna be hanging. So watch out for all of these geometrical motives. But it seems like black can still save himself, and maybe even more than save himself. Maybe black is a little bit better here by playing queen g6. You have to be really brave to play these kinds of moves, but that's just the best move in order to not run into this check on e6. So now queen takes e6 looks like might be an idea, but then knight takes e5, and this queen, it turns out, is in trouble. And even this check is not helping. So you can't go queen e6. Best move probably is to castle queenside. But as you can see yourselves, this is just a total mess. Where the engines like black's chances. So bishop takes h7. Probably not the best move. Long castles, however, as I already mentioned, is quite dangerous, in fact. D takes e3 looks like the logical continuation. Well, you have to serve yourself at some point, need to take some piece. Let's take this bishop, and here again, bishop takes h7. That's white's main idea here. Well, you can't really refuse the sacrifice. You can't go to f7, certainly. That's just gonna lead to the end of the game immediately. King h8 is possible, but here queen h3, and there's no cure against bishop g6 and queen h7, this typical mating maneuver. Not even rook e8 or rook f7 help making some space, because that's just gonna delay the mating. So king takes h7, queen h3, and then again, what are you gonna do with black here? Are you gonna have balls of steel and play king g6? That's a really tough decision, or maybe you're just gonna go back to g8, and that's what Georg Meyer did. That's the more human move, but king g6, the engine says also fine. Here, another branch of complications begin. Again, all kinds of continuations are possible. f5 is one idea. Queen takes e6. Also g4 is possible. Knight h4. You have to calculate all this stuff. Idea of f5, by the way, is takes, and here knight h4, and all kinds of checks are gonna follow. So you should not take this pawn, but just go queen f7, the computer says. Now, this is all quite unhuman, this is quite silicon-y, and it's close to impossible to find your way through the jungle of variations in under time pressure as a human. So you have to play intuitively a bit here. Queen h3 check, king g8, takes on e6, and now king h8. That's preferable to king h7, because here there's queen takes e6 attacking this rook. Rook a7 is the normal reply here. e6 winning by pinning, it so seems. Rook c7 counter-attacking the queen and x-raying along the c-file, attacking the knight as well. Here queen e4, f5, queen takes e3, and we see that the position of the king on h7 is actually quite a problem, because the queen went to e4 with check, collected the pawn, and now that the knight is defended on c3, the knight on d7 is going to fall, and white's going to win easily. So king h8 played by Meyer instead, and after queen takes e6, rook a7, here we see that king to h8 did have another drawback, and Vladimir Kramnik in irresistible style continues his attack, playing knight h4, hinting at entering black's camp once again here via g6. Another move was to play e6 here. However, now we can see that black is saving himself by playing rook c7. Now there's no check on e4, and after queen e4, rook takes c3, black is doing fine. So knight h4 is the weapon of choice here. Now queen e8 is the best move defending against this threat, and knight d5. Also e6 needed to be considered, since black's pieces are really beginning to feel awkward. Both e5 and c5 are controlled by white's pawns. Knight b8 is the only square left for the knight. Now even takes actually is possible, and f5. Playing for long-term compensation, white's gonna collect this pawn. He will have 2 pawns for the piece. There's a check on g6 coming, the knight is jumping to d5. It's incredible. Well, actually it's going to be 3 pawns. And white has just very good chances, maybe even the winning hand in this position. So you have to be aware of those kind of long-term compensation ideas as well, not only immediate mating threats against your king as black. So incredibly hard defending tasks. Even queen b6 is possible here, where rook b7, queen takes e3, again leaves white with the upper hand. There's ideas of f5, knight g6, queen h3 looming. Also knight is coming to g5. It's gonna be an incredibly powerful octopus here in the center, and it's really difficult to hold his own for black. Only move here f5, asking questions to the knight. Queen h3, asking some questions to this king now. Takes, queen 8 takes h4 check, king g8. And now it seems like black is able to hold the balance, because he controls this e7 square. e7 is not possible, and in the next move he's gonna capture this pawn. White is gonna have 3 pawns as a compensation, but who knows what's gonna happen. Probably it's some kind of dynamic equality, but of course it's incredibly difficult to calculate this from afar. So instead, knight d5, not e6, but knight d5 happened. Also a very scary looking move now, just renewing the threat against black's pieces by introducing back the idea of fork on g6, and king h7 looks very logical, but the computer says g5 is the right move here. Why not? I mean, yeah, this just looks crazy. So the idea is knight takes, g takes h4, and knight takes c8 is possible, queen takes c8, and black is surviving at least. Knight f5 is another alternative. However, here bishop b7 seems to solve black's problems by just taking on d5 in the next move. F takes g5, by the way. Now again bishop b7, and after queen c7, which looks like a very decent pin, bishop d8, queen d6 and e2. seems to be holding on for black. Well, probably even more than that. Black is actually better. But this is just computer chess by now. So g5 has not been played, but was possible. Check with the engine to understand the position. Actually, don't check with the engine. Check with yourself. Just sit at a board and play through the lines to understand this position. Incredibly exciting stuff, as I find. So king h7 was the more human move, but now takes on e7, takes knight f5, and black considered necessary to sacrifice some material playing knight takes e5. We're gonna get back to that move in just a second. Queen e8 was the only move to hold the position, to maintain the balance. Now knight d6, and there's queen e6 pinning this knight, thereby defending this bishop on c8, and now it seems like black is holding his own. There's also the idea of queen a2 with counter-attacking chances. So rook e1 and takes on e3. White is a pawn, is a piece down, but does have still some weapons in his arsenal. So here Georg Meyer played knight takes e5, which looks sensible as well, since f takes e5, bishop takes f5 is great for black. Queen e4 is also great for black, just securing his material advantage, but simply takes on e7, takes on c6, knight takes, rook c7, and knight d4. Transposed now into an endgame, so the nerves were calmed down finally for both players. Queen's off the board, no mating ideas. But let's take stock. White is a pawn up. This pawn on e3 is gonna be collected in a couple of moves, and the knighty on d4 is just very powerful, can't be removed, controls a lot of squares, and turned out that White's advantage is really difficult to deal with, and in the end Vladimir Kramnik won the pawn on e3 and converted his advantage to a full point. Right, so that should be it. Didn't mean to do such a long video, but I just couldn't help myself. Such exciting games, great stuff during the 6th round of the Olympiad. I just had to go into some depth here, so please excuse the length of the video. Hope you enjoyed my little summary of the day. Tomorrow the Olympiad's gonna continue with the 7th round, 1 p.m. Central European time, 3 p.m. local Baku time. Make sure to tune in into one of 5 live commentaries in 5 different languages, either on the official website or on Chess24. All right, so I wish you guys a great evening or morning, depending on when you're gonna watch this video. Make sure to stay with us to tune in for the next rounds, and thank you for watching. Cheers.